Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending this BizChat. We have Gary Loustale here, who is going to be talking about owning your own computer services business. He is going to share with us a little bit of his career background. A few housekeeping items, though, before we get started. You are all going to be muted, and that is just for security purposes, so that Gary and I are the only ones that are on the recording being shown. And we ask so that you do have yourself on the video, so that if there is anything that does happen, we have your recording on our video. We also ask that if you have any questions for Gary as he shares information, that you can ask any questions for him via the chat box, and then I'll read them out to Gary and he'll answer accordingly. And then we also have the last thing that I wanted to let you guys know is at the end of the BizChat, we will be sharing a survey link that I'll ask you guys to complete so that we can make sure all of our BizChats are beneficial and useful information for you. Okay, so without further ado, Gary, would you please just share with us a little bit about your career background and what you're currently doing, just so that we have a general idea as you're sharing information, just what your background is regarding your career path.
Sure. So right now I am retired from a teaching position up north in Butte County, and I worked for Butte County Office of Education, and I was a career tech education teacher in the field of information technology, information systems, programming, and business management. Prior to that, for 25 years, I ran my own IT information systems business. Did that for quite a while, learned a lot, enjoyed doing it. It's probably one of the most, fun things I've ever done. The difficult thing was that you do get burned out after a while, but 25 years after that point, I was ready to go full-time into teaching. So that is basically a little bit about me in a nutshell. I am an adjunct now for West Hills, have taught one class last semester, and I would really like to go face-to-face as soon as we can, but that's not possible yet. So when it does, we will move to that. Next thing is a career in information tech, information systems. What was it like for me? What were some of the most important things? I'm starting off with soft skills. Soft skills were just so important for the success of my business. I had to work at it with my technicians, with my programmers, my technical staff. We really needed to work on soft skills. I found that out right away, that communication was just so important. So I have a little presentation here that'll move us along, if it comes up. There we go. So, just soft skills in the workplace, kind of what's it look like, why, I said it was real important. Well, it was extremely important because it brought back business. It was a method for us to measure what was happening and to know, were we doing a good job? What could we do better? So technical staff people a lot of times resist this. They do not want to work on soft skills. So it had to come to a point in my business where it was important. And I listed the 5 basic soft skills that were important for my business. And those are listed here: the communication skills, being a team player, strong work ethic, flexibility, and a positive attitude. These things were just mandatory at my business, and we worked on them all the time, constantly. One of the, to me, misconceptions is that soft skills are just inherent. You either have them or you don't. And I just say that is totally false. They are made, they are a tool. You could practice them, and practice makes perfect. So in my business, we were always practicing different ways of communicating, whether it be verbal, whether it be written, audio, all the different methods that we could possibly come up with in communicating. Written communication was very important. Anytime you worked for a client, something had to be written upon what you did. So very, very important to practice it and get better with it. And then filters, a lot of times we hear what we want to hear. And that was why it's so important to write things down and to be able to have a written copy of what you said, either for your coworkers or also for customers, especially customers, because they want to go back. People only hear a few things of what you say a lot of times, and so having things written down just so important. So one of the things I found right away in my business was that we needed some type of a tool or some type of a method to practice. And I joined a Toastmasters club because I thought, hey, let's, somebody invited me to one, and I joined Toastmasters. And Toastmasters is an international club. I looked, there's one in Hanford where people meet. Usually it's for breakfast or for lunch or for dinner. In Butte County, where I came from, they had one of each, so you could pick where you wanted to go. They even had one at California State University, Chico, for students. And Toastmasters, the goals are written here. Effective sales presentations, assume management roles, building teams, giving and receiving constructive feedback. Very, very important. So what my technicians would be able to do is they'd go to these Toastmaster meetings and they'd be able to practice their presentations with professionals from the community, and they would give them feedback of how they saw you, what they heard you say, and it was very, 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 very constructive for myself, and I passed it on to my students, and they enjoyed it. They grew from it. We could see growth. And that's what was very important. So I would encourage anybody to find a local Toastmasters or something like this where you can practice speaking to people and get feedback and get honest feedback. Maybe you're not speaking clearly. Maybe you have an annoying habit. You'll calm down. You'll get better at it. So anything like this worked for my company. I had different technical staff going to these meetings and also practicing. The next very important part is being a team player. Everybody has to be on the same team. That's one thing you'd hear me say all the time to staff. So we're on the same team. We're on the same team here. And when people are on the same team, it looks like this picture. They're happy, they're getting along, and they want to make whatever you're doing work. So being on the same team, key thing. Another saying I had was know the goal and know your role. That would go a long way in making sure that we did a good job. And we would do, some of our jobs were very small, like maybe dealing with setting up a 5-user system, or maybe 350 users. So it varied, but I always told my staff that, even if it was a one person, practice these team player goals so that you get better at them. And they would, and they did get better. And you could tell when everybody was working together to the same means, and the customer liked it too. What happens when you don't do that? The big knot. Everything gets knotted up. Things don't get done. People aren't happy. And me, the boss, says, let's start over. Do I need to get another team here? What's going on? So you don't want to have that knot. You don't want it in your stomach. You don't want it on your team. You don't want it anywhere. Okay, strong work ethic. Another one that is very, very important. To be able to work with your team and go home and do maybe some homework and then come back and contribute. Find out something that the team needed to know, and you found it by doing a little extra work. I had a technician one time that he was overachiever. He worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. I'd have to, like on weekends, what he'd do is he'd get permission from the client that we were working on a job, and he would sneak in and work on their system to help make it better, or to make whatever our job was that we were doing at that time. And I'd have to, send him home because he was working too much. I said, you can't do that. I could offer you comp time for some of this, but I can't pay you 8 hours a week. 80 hours is too much. But he set the tone though for when people were on his team, they knew that Earl was going to put 100% plus, and it's just a great attitude to have. It's changes the whole dynamic of a workforce when the boss is trying to tell people, no, don't work so much. It's just a great thing. So that was fun. Flexibility, empowering my managers and my tech team leads so that they have the power to do it their way. That was real hard for me. I had to give up. I said, no, I give them a list of goals, and I had to start tearing my list of goals up. I wanted them to create their goals. They were empowered. And then that helped engage the employees because they wanted to also help their lead. And the empowerment started from there. And then the output at the end was 100% happy customers, because the lead on the job, he knows exactly how things are going. He knows what the feedback is from the customers. He gets the body language from all the end users that we're using, whatever it might be. Could be from a MySQL program to a word processing setup to mail servers. Back in the day, we did a lot of mail servers. They were very popular. So that person needed to be empowered with the ability to do their job and do it well, and not have the boss, me, looking over their shoulder all the time. And it made them flexible. It made me flexible. So it's like I say, number one thing. And again, there's not one way of doing things. There's many ways. And when people can be flexible and they're working as a team and they can understand where another person is coming from, it makes it that much more possible, that much more fun. Positive attitude. I can't overemphasize the positive attitude. It just takes one person on the job to turn things around and make it a negative, a Debbie Downer, we used to call it. And we don't want that. We don't want any Debbie Downers. And especially when you're working in a technical field, just like flexibility, there are a lot of ways to set up programs, lots of ways to initiate what needs to take place, and troubleshooting is going to happen. And the best way troubleshooting is successful is with a positive attitude. Everybody on the team says, oh, we've got this problem. Okay, we know we can solve this problem. We have enough people on this team that can figure this out. We figured out hundreds of other problems. And with that positive attitude, it just gets the job done that much quicker. It instills confidence in your customer. They feel like you know what you're doing. And when they feel like you know what you're doing, you have a situation where you can get things done and get the customer back for the next job that needs to be done. So those are the very key soft skills that are important, I felt, in my business. And they also helped us to keep gaining new customers and better customers, and made the business very successful, gave people raises and smiles on their faces. And that was always a good thing. So I encourage you to work on these the best you possibly can. Okay, so
thank you, Gary. So when you're done sharing your slideshow, your presentation, you can just go to the top and there's going to be a red button that says, yep, perfect. Great job.
Okay.
So then you did share those great soft skills that you found students need to have in order to succeed in your experience, in your career that you've had. How would you recommend students go about gaining those soft skills, like growing those, developing those? I know you mentioned Toastmasters. Do you have any other recommendations for students?
Oh, yeah. One of the ways students would always, I would hire, in my job, I hired entry-level positions, and I had more advanced positions. And what we would do is we would even work on individuals who maybe had one computer and they had a database or they had spreadsheets that they were working on and they needed help. And I would hire young technicians, and I wanted them to learn working on, some of the clients that, not a more larger, group of people, so that they could learn. And one thing that I found was whatever job you have, I don't care if you're working at McDonald's, Burger King, or you have a small job. And I used to get students who were obtaining maybe a certificate from a community college or working on their AS degree. And then they would apply for a job, but they didn't have any experience behind it. But they did work. They worked at McDonald's. They worked somewhere that was a job that they thought was menial, didn't mean much. But they put it on their resume, and I would always, pick up on the resume and start talking about, okay, well, what would you do when somebody didn't like their hamburger? What type of, so you could practice these things in other jobs that you have. You can work on these soft skills. It doesn't have to be just a tech type environment. It could be any job that you do. You practice those skills and you can make it a cognitive thing to get better at them. As far as there are classes that you can take, public speaking, for instance, anytime that you have the ability to speak with people and get feedback is good. So if you could do something like that, that's great. And then there are tons of books out available. The internet is full of stuff that you could possibly do to improve your soft skills or what they are and try to get better at them. But you're not going to get better unless you make a plan and try to work at it.
Perfect, thank you. So just for everyone that's on the call, if you guys have any questions for Gary as we're doing this biz chat, feel free to type them into the chat box and then I'll read them out to Gary if you're interested in getting more information about anything that he's sharing today. So Gary, really fast, why don't you share with us a little bit about why you got started or what drew you to starting your own computer services business?
Okay. I had worked in, so just to go back a little bit, I have an AS degree from San Joaquin Delta Community College, and that was in electronic technology. And then I did receive a bachelor's degree from Cal State University, Chico, in industrial technology, emphasis in computer technology. And that background, of course, led me to get a job pretty easily in Silicon Valley. I worked for a computer manufacturing company that made servers, and it was okay. I mean, you're definitely on the leading edge when you're in Silicon Valley, and I would recommend people. It's not that far away. I kind of like Lemoore is a small country rural town. I grew up in Tracy, California, same type of thing, close to San Joaquin Delta College, and I grew up on a dairy farm. So it was something that being out in the country, not maybe necessarily in the city, I tolerated working in Silicon Valley, and I learned a lot while I was there. But I always had it in the back of my mind, I'd like to work for myself. I want to call the shots. I want to be able to be an entrepreneur where I build something that I can be proud of and that I can share with my family and that people enjoy. So I always had that kind of in the back of my mind that I wanted to do that. And then when a possibility came that I could, I did. I put my job in Silicon Valley and started my business and went from there. So that's how I basically got into the industry, was that I had a drive for it and I wanted to do it. And I found out that when I got into it, I needed to get better at it. And one of the problems I had was I had strong technical skills, but I didn't have a lot of accounting type skills. And so I had to take a few courses and bring myself back up. When you take a accounting class, we have accounting classes and different classes that you take during either a AS degree or a bachelor's degree. And it's different when you're put into the field with it than from studying it from a classroom. You just don't get the real feel. And so it's okay to go back and take a review course and do that. So had to do some of that to get back into what I needed to know about running a business.
Sounds good, thank you. So then what were some of your general responsibilities as the owner of computer services?
Okay, well, generally I was in charge of hiring and training my staff. And the other thing that I was in charge of was bidding jobs. Jobs would come up and I would put the bid out. I'd compete against other companies to to a certain job specific bid that was put out, and I had to do homework and research and take care of that. And that also, I was building my customer base and my customer relations so that my business could continue. And overseeing, basically, anytime you have to put some people in charge of your accounting and some people in charge of your equipment and other people in charge of your advertising, but you would oversee those things so that you make sure that they're happening properly. But my biggest emphasis was hiring staff and training them, because I felt that if I could train them like I wanted to, they would be successful because I was successful in the field. So that was one of the typical responsibilities, and that I took very serious in doing so.
That's good, thank you. Was it difficult to begin the steps of starting your own company? I know you mentioned the accounting classes, but to actually create your own business, did you find that difficult, or was that an easy process?
No, it's difficult. I think the feedback I would get was that it really takes 5 years to establish a good business and get your business plan really functioning properly. And I'm a big advocate of business plans because they'll change constantly. If you're doing it right, you write your business plan on day 1, and day 2, there's already changes to it. It's just a heck of a guide and a barometer of what's going on and what direction you should go. So yeah, they were accurate in 5 years of really feeling like my legs were under my feet. I think prior to that, it was like, am I doing this right? Am I going in the right direction? Did we, is the business plan right? Is the business plan wrong? That kind of stuff that you need to keep looking over, and you're just jittery because you're not sure. So I would agree that, people used to say, I go, no, I could do that in 1 year. I could do that in 2 years. But to really get comfortable and to have a good base of customers, it's a 5-year process. It's not overnight. Maybe it is for some people. It wasn't for me.
Sounds good. What is when you were in that time frame of your life, what did a normal workday look like for you?
Okay, so it could change, but in the normal world, when I would show up, let's say lead technicians were doing an installation for XYZ job. Maybe it was 350 users, like I said before, maybe it was 100 users. So my job would be to go over what their plan was, how they planned to attack it. I would oversee what they were doing, check in, make sure that everything was going okay. It might even mean going out to the site, seeing how they're doing at the site. So taking care of that type of a function, what are my techs doing today? And in some days, maybe they were in-house, they were caught up, and they were basically practicing and getting better for when they go out in the field again. So then that would be a training time. So it could vary. It varied from depending on where we were as a company. And things changed when I first got into this business, like in the early 90s, believe it or not, IT people or businesses didn't want to deal with anything IT over the summer. And so we had real slow summers. There wasn't a lot going on. And so that's when we do our training and catch up time. That changed. I think 3 years down the road, it was, and as technology changed, it just became a more and more part of every business in many directions. That changed so that we were busy throughout the year. But it had times where we would do training, had times when we were out in the field, and I would help out as best I could, troubleshooting issues that the leads had, maybe in an installation or some coding problems that they might have. And then there were always the everyday tasks of, making sure you had money for payroll, making sure that you had a customer base and somebody was checking on your customers to find out were they satisfied to the type of work you were doing, feedback, constantly getting feedback. And so I would do that too. Let me see, what else did I have on day to day? Again, I said training employees, troubleshooting problems, overseeing staff, and job performance reviews for the day they were pretty common on what was going on. As much feedback as I could give to my employees, I wanted to.
Would you say that you had a set schedule, or was your schedule kind of always fluctuating and always changing?
It was always fluctuating and changing. It's not, that's one thing in IT and IS, time flies and it's never the same. So you don't get bored and time goes by real quick. I know some jobs where we would work in the evenings because the customers were gone. So if you're doing an upgrade to a system, you do it in the evening hours, and it'd be amazing how the time would fly by. It went by fast because there was just always something to do, and always you weren't sitting there bored. So yeah, every day was a little bit. Some days might be a planning day, and some days you're putting out fires.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. So then what would you say would be your biggest day-to-day challenges in this role?
I think planning for what staff had to do was always a challenge because you had different teams and leads that you wanted to do different jobs, and you had to kind of move them around in different directions, so that it's just, you know, strategies to try to make sure that you have the best people on a job doing the best for the customer and for us as a company. So planning in that regard was always important. And then training was super important, because if you products were changing all the time and updates were coming out all the time, and if you didn't keep up on the updates and the changes, then you couldn't make them, and then you were behind the curve, and your customers might go somewhere else because they're not getting the service that they needed. So yeah, definitely training was just always important.
Sounds good. Thank you.
State of the art.
Was it difficult to facilitate trainings, or was that something that you enjoyed, and was it easy to come up with training exercises and materials?
That was not super difficult, and in some cases it might mean sending employees to a seminar, you know, so they could get out of the office and, you know, and to hear it from somebody else and speak with other trainees or other technicians that were in the field out there. Companies, different, like we had a company named Novell that would put on trainings. Different certificated type places would put on trainings, and you could send people out. You could always find training. It was not difficult.
Okay.
So it was good.
So then you would do the trainings out of house. You wouldn't do
Sometimes
them
out of
internal.
house. Oh, I do internal training also. We do both. Yeah, we would do both. There were internal training where the type of office we had was a big open area with everybody with a side little cubicle, and you could meet in the middle. And we were constantly meeting in the middle for some type of training of something, some sort, you know. And then different people would take turns leading that. They would do a little homework on a certain area. I might tell them, you know, help us out with this area, and then they would give a little synopsis on it, and then we check for understanding. We do little quizzes and stuff like that, and make it a teamwork type of thing, or a competition to see who could come up with the right answers and make it fun.
So earlier you were mentioning, and you shared with us some of your educational background and how you took some refresher courses when you decided to be an entrepreneur. How has the things that you learned in the classroom, how have they transitioned into your real world experiences? Do you find them to be, in your experience, were they all applicable? Did you use some more than the others? You also mentioned soft skills earlier in this biz chat. So when it comes to your education, how applicable was that? And did it tie into those soft skill development at all?
Well, it seems like it tied in once I was in the field. You know, there's book knowledge, and then there's real knowledge out in the field. And so it made more sense to me when, like, a business plan, you know, I did a business plan in college, and, you know, you kind of put it together and get a grade on it and you're happy. Well, to me, a business plan is a live document. It's changing constantly. And businesses change constantly. So you're always reviewing it and making addendums and changes to it. So when I took a class the second time on business management, the business plan meant a whole lot more to me than it was a hypothetical situation prior to owning a business. It was real. It meant something to me. And businesses out there, you can see businesses today that like Netflix, their business plan is changing. They started off, I would get a DVD in the mail from them. Now they're producing shows. And that's a change from when they first started. That's a change in their business plan. So yeah, once you get going and you're working, don't stop learning. Take a class, and it's going to mean that much more to you. And just because you take one accounting class, you're not an expert on accounting. Once you have a business, you have to pay taxes. Then you're wanting to know more about accounting and what you can do better with it. So it's an ongoing process. It was for me. Had to keep learning, and it meant more to me when I had my business.
Sounds good. Thank you. So then what are some things that you really enjoyed and that you liked when it came to being an entrepreneur and working in IT?
I really enjoyed winning bids, when the competition of putting together a system for a client. My first large bid, 350 users. It was a municipality, and I was competing against IBM. And I was like, oh my gosh, big blue, how am I going to do this? And I was nervous and scared. And we won the bid. We put our brains together. We came up with a sales pitch that the clients liked, they were happy with, and ended up a 10-year long relationship with that client. So that was fun. And anytime the bidding process and how to put things together and how to get your staff involved so that you could provide the best option for the price for a client. That was fun. It was a rush. It was a rush, and I enjoyed that a lot. It was very much very, very fun. And to see my technicians and leads grow. One of the philosophies I had was, because we were in a smaller town, that I encouraged people, apply for other jobs, job growth, because you could only go so high with me. And it had a tone at our business that if you plateau out, well, maybe there's something else out there. I had employees that ended up working for some of my customers, and we had a positive relationship. And then when they were hired by some of my customers, we have even more of a positive relationship with that company. So again, like my soft skills, positive attitude, I tried to keep that in my business too. And to see people succeed and get better at what they were doing and to improve, I loved it. So those are my kind of my highlights of running the business, and made it fun. 25 years flew by. It's a fun thing.
Sounds great. Thank you. This wasn't on one of my questions for you, but since you mentioned bidding, what are some necessary items that are expected when you submit a bid?
You mean as far as, well, there's always like bidder qualifications. Sometimes you might have to have been a Microsoft certified technician, or a technician or office. So there was always bid specs depending on what type of bid is available for the public. But yeah, bid specs were different for all different kinds of jobs. So in some cases, maybe you qualified, in some cases you didn't. Or if you found that a lot of bids were coming up and you weren't qualified, then you'd have to get some certified technicians in that area or programmers in that area to be certified to bid the job. Is that kind of what you meant?
Yeah, and also just another question on bidding. How do you find out about when a company is looking for bidding opportunities? Like, is there, I would imagine, if you're looking for employment, you go to like Indeed, Glassdoor, on campus we have Job Speaker. Where do you go when you're a company and you do bidding as a way to get jobs?
Oh, there are companies that provide bid lists, and you get a list of all like municipalities that are bidding on things, and I can't remember the names now, but you could easily Google it and find bid lists of areas that you're in, and they pop up because the bidders want as many people possible to bid, because that usually creates competition and lowers the price. So they want good qualified people to be bidding on their products, and they get the word out, and there's companies that'll provide that information for you.
Perfect, thank you. And then on those bid lists, then I would assume that's where the qualifications or specifications that they're asking for would be listed.
Yeah, they'll list out. You'll get a packet from them, and the packet will come out, and then you can read through it, and you'll find out what's on that list. And a lot of them, like let's say municipalities, different cities, they're a lot the same. So you could start saying, hey, we need to get this certification, or we need to be authorized through whoever the vendor is or something like that. So you would start to see that and get on those lists, or get that information to your leads so that they were prepared.
Sounds good. Thank you. Sorry, I was throwing that at you, but I was just
No,
curious
that's
as
easy.
you mentioned it.
That's a good question. Very good question.
So my next question then for you is, what did you dislike about being an entrepreneur and working in IT?
I think sometimes there just wasn't a good match with whether it be an employee or a customer, and sometimes you just had to move on and go in a direction. You can't please everybody 100%. You can try, but you find out, what, their needs and my needs are different. But to find that, because when you have a positive attitude, you want to be able to solve all issues. But then you have to look back and say, wait a minute, maybe this just isn't a good match or a good fit. So you have to say no. And so that was always hard. It was the hardest thing to do, when do you say that? And sometimes with an employee too. I mentioned earlier that I would hire entry level employees, and I would give them entry level jobs, but I wanted to see growth. If they didn't have growth, then I had to let them go, and that was hard too. It's nowadays, in the last 5-7 years, and I have friends that are still in business or work for companies that do hiring, and the interview process it's not uncommon to have 3 interviews with a whole variety of different types of people working for that company. It's not just, they're not going to have one interview and say, okay, good, ready to go. They're really trying to evaluate, are you a team member? Will you fit with this group? And my advice is, be yourself, because you don't know what their fit is. And if you try to adapt and change to what you think it is, that's going to take away from who you are. So it's important to be yourself and to develop these skills and let people know what your skills are.
Perfect. Thank you. That was great advice about interviewing, by the way. That's something that we share in the Win Center to students often, is that there are typically multiple interviews, and they're all different people that sit on an interview panel, and to be yourself is the best way to make sure that you're happy and content in that job, which then makes you a good employee for that company.
Yeah. And bring your resume to interviews. Sometimes HR loses them, they don't have them, and you don't. And the most important thing to make sure that somebody who's interviewing you has your resume, because that's what you're an expert in. You're an expert on your resume. You want the employer to ask questions from your resume. And I always encourage students, take resumes with you. Take 5 of them with you, because if you're being interviewed and that particular person, because there's so many of them, doesn't have a copy of your resume, give it to them. Say, here's a copy of my resume. And there are 9 out of 10 times they're going to ask you a question from that resume, which inside and out. So that's what you want.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. That's perfect information. Just so everyone knows on the call, I have about 2 more questions for Gary. So if you have any questions for him, now's the time to put them in the chat. So Gary, my next question for you is, what advice would you give to students who are interested in owning their own IT or information systems company?
Yeah, that's a good question, because again, like I said, the industry is always changing, and there are, each day it's a little different. But it's very important to ask questions of people who are running a business now, or who are working in that field now. Ask them, if you could ask them, how their business runs or what the models are, and find out from from Google. You can Google questions. It's okay to Google a question and see what comes back about, IT jobs. How many are there? What is the most current trend? What types of work are customers requiring from IT and information services people? Ask questions is definitely one of the top things, and keep asking them. Because you want to find out what maybe niche area you're going to be in, because it's a broad field. It's super, super broad. I found out I hired 2 printer technicians one time. And what I found was that my competition, they would anytime anybody had a printer, and these were, big printers that you printed lots of data out on. And nowadays, probably can't do that as much because, people are going paperless and there's not as much printing. But in early 2000s, there was a lot going on. Well, I got 2 of the top-notch printers that worked on printers that I could find. And what ended up happening was my competition would send me their clients that had issues with printers, and I would light up. I was going, oh my gosh, they're giving me an open door to their clients to come in. And it worked. What happened was we'd take care of their printing issues, and then they'd start asking us about different IS issues that were going on, and we gained them as a client. So you never know what direction you might need to take, but you find out by asking people, talking more, lots of questions. Talk to any type of business owners. How are they running their business? Again, from your community college, a business management class, an entrepreneur class. Those are great things to take. They don't take up a whole lot of time to take one of those classes, and you get a lot of feedback as to what other people are doing and what the latest trends are. So that's always good. And then research, if you like working with databases, research and find out how many people are needing database work. There's information out there that'll give you feedback of what they need. So do some research on what you like to do. It's always one of the best things is if you're happy, you're going to be able to give your customers a lot of satisfaction, and they're going to continue with you. So do that research, find out. And then, need to write a business plan. Even though you start off and you're not sure how you're going to do it, and people like to put that off on the back burner, but that business plan is real important. It might be after the first month of business, it's completely changed, and that's good, because things do change, and you might find out that you're going in a different direction, but you need somewhere to start. And if you don't have a business plan, you're just out there kind of spinning like a top. What direction are you going? Wherever the top takes you. So a business plan helps you at least start in a direction, and you could shift. But I always say, get some information about the business plan, get somebody to help you with a business plan. And that's advice that I would give.
Sounds good. Thank you. So my last question for you, and it's not one that we had specified earlier, but okay. You mentioned Toastmasters. Can you share with me a little bit about how you got started in that organization? Did you have to apply? Was it just something that you went and attended a meeting? How would a student get involved in Toastmasters?
Yeah, that's a good question. Somebody invited me to a meeting. They said, hey, another thing that I was always involved in is business networking. Like there's different networking business teams that meet at lunch or dinner or whatever they do, and it's people in your community that are businessmen and want to network. They want to real estate or banking or IT services, and all of us that owned businesses would meet for lunch, and then we would talk. So somebody from one of those meetings invited me to a Toastmasters meeting, said, hey, why don't you come to one of these meetings? You could see what it's about. And that's one thing about Toastmasters. It's free to come and look. Back when I was running my business, once you joined, it was like $15, I think, a month or a quarter. It wasn't very much. And you'd have to maybe pay for your breakfast if you had breakfast, or if you didn't want to eat, you didn't have to. They usually would meet at a restaurant or some place where there was food, but not all of them. So I went to a meeting as a guest, and found out that from other people presenting, usually at a Toastmasters meeting, 3 people present that day, and then they're critiqued on what their presentation is. And it might be a real estate agent practicing on a presentation that they're going to do for a customer so that they could win the contract to sell their house. And so they would practice what they were going to say, and then they get feedback from what I said. Hey, this is kind of cool. I could some of my presentations to businesses, I could practice them and get feedback. And so that's how I was able to get into it. And then I think I even ended up being president after a while. But our whole Toastmasters Club was really about people growing and learning, and they were professionals that had either were retired or were still in the field of whatever their field was, and they were extremely emphasizing that growth for people to get better at your skill, to get better at what you do. And in speaking, public speaking, that was a method of getting better. So I like that. And that's how I got involved. And they're everywhere. I don't know if it's sometimes it's not as popular. Some college campuses have Toastmasters just for the students to get better and practice. And it's like, sometimes I'd get critiqued and somebody'd really, say, wait a minute here, your preparation wasn't that great. You didn't seem to make sense over here. And you go, oh, you can't fool them, which was good. And you didn't have to it wasn't an F in the class. It was just after you left, you said, okay, growth, let's go. And it was good. So I enjoyed it.
Sounds good. Thank you. For those of you that are attending, while he was sharing on his experience with Toastmasters, I went and got the Hanford Toastmasters website. So I have it posted here for you in the chat. If Toastmasters is something that you're interested in, the website here is for the Hanford Toastmasters that he was referring to. Also, Gary, would you be interested in being a mentor for students who are interested in going either into entrepreneurship or working in the IT field?
Oh, yeah. I would love to share or help in any way I could for anybody who wants to do that.
Perfect. How would you prefer them to reach out to you if they're interested in finding you as a mentor?
The best thing would be to I got distracted. A hummingbird came right up to my window here and was looking at me. I think he wanted to find out about how he could be a mentor. Anyway, the best thing is my email, and to just put in the subject area mentor. So can you give that out, or do we?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I have that here for everyone in the chat. If anyone is interested in sending him an email on mentorship, it's right there in the chat for you. And that really sums up all of my questions then for you, Gary. If anyone does have any last minute questions, feel free to ask them in the chat box. I do have a survey link I mentioned at the beginning that we have a student survey for you guys on the call to just get feedback from you on the event today, if you found the information helpful. If you also can fill out the survey and share with us any ideas you might for a future BizChat. If you want to hear from another industry partner or a different career field, we can find that guest speaker for you for a future BizChat in the spring. Thank you so much, Gary, for being with us today and just taking the time to share with us a little bit about your career path. We really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for attending. So that's it. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.